Have you ever asked yourself, why would the universe send someone who feels so right, only take them away? It's a question that haunts the quiet hours of many hearts. One moment, you're living your life, grounded in reason, focused on the tangible. Then, without warning, someone enters your world, and it's like something ancient stirs inside you. You can't explain it. You just know there's a connection powerful and undeniable. It doesn't make logical sense, but every part of your being recognizes them, as if your soul has known them long, before your mind could comprehend. These moments feel like fate, like some deeper current has drawn you together not just by coincidence, but by design. Psychologist Carl Jung called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to defy logic. Two paths crossing at the precise moment needed for something to awaken in you. When you meet someone under such circumstances, it often feels like destiny. But here's the hard truth. Not every connection is meant to last. Some are only meant to activate you to stir what's been sleeping within your soul. This is where many of us struggle. We've been taught that love should be the destination, that if you feel something real, it should naturally lead to a future together. But some connections are not about building a life side by side. They're about sparking a transformation that you couldn't have accessed alone. And while your human heart may crave safety, certainty, and permanence, your soul often craves something else. Evolution, growth, awakening. I've seen this happen in my own life, and in the lives of countless others I've worked with. We meet someone who cracks us open in ways we never anticipated. They trigger forgotten dreams, buried wounds, longings we abandoned because we thought they were too painful, too unrealistic, too late. And then they're gone, not because the love wasn't real, but because their role was never meant to be permanent. They were a mirror, not a home, a sacred interruption. This is the beginning of the journey we're going to explore. In this video, we'll dive deep into why the universe sends these profound soul connections not to stay, but to awaken you. So if you've ever met someone you couldn't forget, someone whose presence changed you forever, even if they're no longer here, this story is for you. Let's begin. When two souls meet not out of convenience, but out of cosmic timing, something powerful begins to unfold. These are not the fairy tale connections where everything aligns perfectly. No, these are the ones that burn, the ones that shake you to your core. Psychologists and spiritual teachers alike refer to these as catalyst relationships. They don't come into your life to offer comfort, they come to create movement. They're not here to build a home with you. They're here to break open the walls around your soul. You see, love true, soul-level love is not always soft. Sometimes it's a collision, a confrontation. And when the universe sends you a catalyst, they have a very specific role to awaken the parts of you that have been sleeping. It might start beautifully. There's electricity, depth, recognition. You feel seen in a way you never have before. But very quickly, something shifts. The connection begins to trigger something deeper, something raw. Your unhealed wounds, long buried beneath years of coping, begin to surface. Suddenly, you find yourself reacting in ways you can't fully explain. Old fears of abandonment, unworthiness, shame, they come flooding back. Why? Because this person, this soul, reflects your shadow as much as your light. Love becomes a mirror, and what it shows you isn't always easy to accept. You start to see the parts of yourself you've ignored. The inner child still longing to be chosen, the part of you that settles, the pieces still waiting to be healed. It's important to understand this distinction. The human heart craves certainty. It wants to know, are you staying? Can I count on you? The soul, on the other hand, seeks transformation. It whispers, what is this here to teach me? These two are often in conflict. Your heart might scream, I don't want to lose them. But your soul is quietly urging, don't miss the lesson. From the outside, these relationships may appear chaotic or short-lived. but inside they're revolutionary. They serve a sacred purpose, to activate your next level of growth. I remember one client telling me, it felt like she walked into my life and turned all the lights on. I thought it was love, but looking back, she was my awakening. That's the paradox. They may hurt you, but they don't harm you. They force you to confront your truths, not to destroy you, but to rebirth you. So if you ever met someone who unearthed your deepest insecurities, your forgotten dreams, your ancient fears, don't dismiss it as failure. This wasn't just a love story. It was a soul contract. One that was never about forever. It was about now. In the next part, we'll explore what happens after the activation when the storm settles and you're left to rebuild. What do you do when the person who changed your life isn't in it anymore? Let's keep going. There comes a moment in every catalyst connection when the high fades, the energy shifts, and the separation begins. It's disorienting, painful. Often it feels like betrayal. But here's a hard truth we don't like to face. The universe doesn't prioritize your comfort, it prioritizes your evolution. We live in a world that glorifies harmony, longevity, and closure. But soul-aligned growth rarely unfolds that neatly. Sometimes, the most profound awakenings happen through chaos. Sometimes, the very thing that breaks you saves you. When a soul connection fractures, it's tempting to view it as a mistake, a failure. But what if the separation wasn't a flaw in the design, but the design itself? Think of it like this. You don't rebuild your life when everything is going smoothly. You don't question your patterns, your pain, or your purpose when you're in comfort. It's the rupture, the breaking open, that lets the light in. As Leonard Cohen famously wrote, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That crack born from heartbreak, grief. Confusion is often your entry point into deeper awareness. When someone walks away or a relationship ends abruptly, it shocks the system. You're forced to sit with emotions you've avoided. Questions you've buried rise to the surface. Why did this affect me so deeply? What part of me did this awaken or expose? What am I truly being asked to learn here? It's easy to cling, to resist the loss. But separation is not always a punishment. Often, it's a necessary clearing, a sacred disruption that creates space for the next version of you to emerge. I've seen this over and over in clients and friends, even in my own life. The ones who left, the endings that hurt the most, were the ones that pushed us toward the most powerful versions of ourselves. Because pain, when alchemized, becomes clarity. Loss, when integrated, becomes strength. The end of us often marks the beginning of me. Here's something I truly believe. The universe doesn't take people from your life to punish you, it removes them when their role in your evolution is complete. And that's not cruelty, that's grace. This is how transformation happens, not in the gentle lull of stability, but in the fire of loss. Not when you're safe, but when you're shattered and forced to rebuild with greater awareness, intention, and depth. So if you're standing in the ruins of something that once felt destined, know this. You're not broken. You're becoming. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when the dust settles, when you're no longer clinging to the past, but you're still unsure of who you are without it. This is where healing truly begins. Let's continue. We often console ourselves after a painful parting with the idea that it was right person, wrong time. It sounds romantic, poetic, even, as if the stars just barely misaligning, and that with a bit more patience or maturity, everything might have worked out. But let me offer a different lens, one that's harder to swallow, but far more empowering. What if it was the right person at exactly the right time, just not for the reason you hoped? Sometimes, people don't come into your life to stay, they come to shake you. They arrive not to complete your story, but to disrupt the script you've been living by. It's natural to long for permanence. We crave it. We want the soulmate to last, the fairy tale to unfold. But soul contracts don't operate according to our timelines. They follow our soul's needs. That person you met, the one who felt like home, who stirred something ancient and electric within you, they didn't show up by accident. Their entrance into your life was timed with precision, not to fulfill a fantasy, but to awaken you from it. They mirrored back all the ways you were still living from fear, from wounds, from illusions. They stirred emotions you thought you had buried. They challenged the identity you built to feel safe in the world. In doing so, they helped you see yourself, not the curated version, not the armored version, but the raw, unfiltered, truthful self that was waiting underneath. And that was the point. Their purpose wasn't to be your forever. It was to be your catalyst, your mirror, to hold up a reflection so piercing that you could no longer pretend. It's tempting to call it bad timing, but here's the deeper truth. They came exactly when you needed them to, not to love you forever, but to liberate you from who you thought you were. If they had arrived at a different time, you might not have been ready. If they had stayed, you might never have evolved. Their impermanence wasn't a failure, it was sacred precision. I've seen this unfold in real life so many times. People show up during breakdowns, breakthroughs, transitions. We hold on to them thinking they were the one, when in reality, they were the bridge, the crossing point from who you were to who you're becoming. And here's the gift wrapped in the pain. When you stop mourning what didn't last, you begin to see what unlocked. You begin to understand that their exit was part of the medicine. Their presence cracked the illusion. Their departure invited your rebirth. So no, it wasn't the wrong time. It was the exact time your soul whispered, it's time to wake up. Have you ever wondered why some people ignite such intense emotional responses in you, even if they're only present for a fleeting moment? Why a single conversation, glance, or embrace can stir up storms inside you that you didn't even know were waiting? That's not coincidence. That's reflection. When you encounter someone who awakens you, it's rarely because they say all the right things or make you feel safe. In fact, more often than not, they disrupt your equilibrium. They disturb your carefully protected emotional landscape because they reflect something deeper. They are mirrors not of who you pretend to be, but of who you truly are. More specifically, they reflect the parts of you that have not yet been healed. The unprocessed grief, the childhood wounds, the dormant rage, the hidden longing, all of it comes bubbling to the surface in their presence. And it's not because they cause those feelings. It's because their energy, their frequency, their presence activates something ancient inside you. It's what Carl Jung meant when he said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. That transformation begins with the rise of emotion. It might feel like heartbreak, or anger, or desperation. You may find yourself saying things you didn't know you believed, crying over memories you thought you buried, or fantasizing about a future that was never meant to be. But those reactions are not meaningless. They are messengers. They are revealing the edges of your soul that are asking for your attention. The pain isn't the enemy, it's the invitation. Here's a mistake many of us make. We try to suppress the emotion. We label it as weakness, instability, or drama. But emotion in its purest form is just energy trying to move through you. It's your body's way of saying, look here, heal this. It's your soul's whisper. This is where you forgot who you are. And so, rather than running from the intensity, what if you leaned into it? What if you asked, what are these feelings showing me about myself? What if you saw this person not as your heartbreak, but as your healer? This doesn't mean they were perfect or that the relationship was painless, but their role in your story was precise. They surfaced your emotional truth so it could no longer be ignored. And when you allow yourself to feel it fully without judgment, you unlock something powerful. Emotions, when honored, become transformation. They no longer hold you hostage. They become the fire through which you purify and the water through which you soften. So if someone has stirred something deep inside you, don't just ask why it hurts. Ask what it's teaching you. Ask what part of your soul they were reflecting back that you've been afraid to see. Because that's the real magic of these soul mirrors. They don't just show you who they are. They show you who you are beneath the layers, beyond the wounds and closer to wholeness. Let's pause for a moment and ask something that cuts deeper than most are willing to explore. What if your pain isn't here to punish you, but to awaken you? So many people carry heartache like a life sentence. They bury it. They wear it. They build their entire identity around the person who left, the connection that broke, the dream that dissolved. But pain, in its purest essence, is not meant to be a prison. It's meant to be a passage. There's a profound difference between unprocessed pain and transformed pain. Unprocessed pain lingers. It seeps into your thoughts, your choices, your relationships. It builds walls. It blinds you with fear. But transformed pain, that's wisdom. That's clarity. That's the ground you stand on when everything else falls away. And here's the paradox. The person who triggered the deepest ache in your heart may have actually gifted you the clearest vision of yourself. They reminded you what it feels like to be fully alive, to want, to hope, to risk, to feel. Those memories, they're not shackles. They are sacred reminders that at one point in your life, you dropped the mask. You showed up raw, honest, vulnerable. You lived from the soul, even if just for a moment. And that matters. Because once you've tasted that kind of authenticity, you can never go back to living a lie. That's why the universe doesn't send you pain to destroy you. It sends it to disrupt the illusion. The illusion that you're fine playing small. The illusion that you're meant to numb your truth for the sake of comfort. The illusion that love only exists in permanence. Pain is the universe's way of grabbing you by the soul and saying, no more pretending. It's time to remember who you are. You weren't meant to settle into a life of emotional numbness. You weren't meant to move from one empty routine to another, avoiding your truth. So yes, pain breaks things, but it also breaks open the parts of you that were never meant to stay closed. The tears you cried, they softened the armor. The ache in your chest, it cracked the shell of your ego. The silence they left behind, it became the echo that led you back to yourself. This is the alchemy of emotional growth. You don't need to forget them to move on. You need to remember why their presence stirred you so deeply. Because what hurt you once may actually be the very thing that shapes the strongest, most grounded version of who you're becoming. So next time the pain returns, don't just ask, how do I get over this? Ask instead, what is this pain turning me into? Because growth doesn't come from what's easy. It comes from walking through the fire and realizing you were being forged, not destroyed. There's a moment in the quiet aftermath of heartbreak where your mind clings to one haunting question. Were they the one and I just lost them? It's a question that keeps people trapped in emotional loops, cycling through memories, what-ifs, and fantasies of what could have been. But here's a truth that can set you free. They weren't your destiny lost. They were your lesson lived. Not every soul you collide with is meant to walk the full journey with you. Some arrive not to stay, but to shift you, to challenge your illusions, to shatter your comfort, to accelerate your evolution. These people often feel like soulmates, and in many ways they are, but not in the romantic fairy tale sense. They are spiritual catalysts. Their role was never about forever. It was about awakening. It's easy to mistake emotional intensity for permanence. The chemistry, the synchronicity, the feeling of, I've known you forever, these are not always signs of lasting love. Sometimes they're signs of karmic ignition. You met them because your soul needed a mirror, a spark, a disruption. And yes, it hurts. Because we live in a world that tells us love must be lasting to be real. That if something ends, it somehow failed. But what if the truth is this? The meaning of a connection isn't defined by its duration, but by its depth. They may not be your life partner, but they were your sole initiator. Their impact was real. Their presence cracked you open. They stirred emotions, unearthed memories, triggered insecurities, and all of it was purposeful, because in doing so, they push you into alignment with your truth. This is what I call the spiritual nudge. That undeniable feeling that you were moved by something greater than logic, not to settle down, but to wake up. So no, not every story ends in togetherness, but that doesn't mean it ends in regret. In fact, your greatest heartbreak might become your greatest turning point, the place where you stop searching for someone to complete you and start becoming the version of yourself that no longer needs to be saved. Remember this, they were a chapter, not the whole book, and clinging to one chapter prevents you from writing the rest of your story. So instead of mourning the what could have been, celebrate the what was revealed. Thank them not because they stayed, but because they showed you a version of yourself that was ready to rise. The pain of their absence is temporary, but the clarity they sparked in you, that's permanent. There's a haunting silence that follows deep heartbreak, not the silence of peace, but of unfamiliarity. You look in the mirror and realize you're not the same person anymore. And that's not a tragedy. That's a rebirth. When someone leaves or when profound connection falls apart, we often say we've lost something, lost love, lost potential, lost a future. But if you look closer, something else was quietly unfolding beneath the pain. You weren't just losing them, you were gaining you. The pain didn't come to destroy you. It came to strip away every version of you that was never truly whole. The need to be chosen, the desperation to be understood, the habit of making yourself smaller to keep someone else comfortable. All of it burned in the fire of that separation. And what emerged from the ashes was someone freer, someone more honest, someone reborn. You may not have realized it while crying on the bathroom floor or rereading old messages, but something sacred was happening. Your soul was reclaiming itself, not gently but truthfully. And now you're beginning to understand. They didn't take anything from you. They returned you to yourself. This is the paradox of spiritual grief. It feels like death, but it's actually birth. A breaking open, not a breaking down. And in that rebirth, a new kind of home is discovered, not in someone else's arms, but in the quiet steadiness of your own soul. This is the moment you no longer chase love to feel whole, because now you know you are whole. You stop searching for someone to validate your worth. You stop bargaining with the universe to bring them back. Instead, you begin to feel a strange, powerful gratitude for what happened. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it woke you up. You finally understand that true emotional freedom doesn't come from being loved perfectly. It comes from loving yourself enough to no longer need perfection. From this place of rebirth, you carry a quieter strength, a knowing, a softness that doesn't come from weakness, but from survival. You've met yourself at rock bottom and found out that home wasn't out there. It was always inside you. We've been conditioned to believe that love only counts if it lasts, that if it doesn't end in forever, then it must have been a mistake. But the soul knows better. Just because a love didn't become a lifelong partnership doesn't mean it wasn't real, doesn't mean it wasn't transformative, and most importantly, it doesn't mean it failed. Some love stories aren't meant to last a lifetime. They're meant to crack you open, to rewire something in your soul, to be a sacred interruption, not a detour, but a divine redirection. The truth is, not all endings are failures. Some are necessary completions. Some are cosmic acts of mercy disguised as heartbreak. We tend to look at separation as something cruel, as if the universe is punishing us or withholding something we deserve. But maybe, just maybe, that very separation was the universe's way of loving you deeply. It knew that you couldn't stay where your soul would shrink, that the relationship was the fire, but the ashes held your future. Love doesn't only exist in the staying. Sometimes, love becomes its most honest in the letting go, in walking away with reverence, in choosing growth over comfort, in saying goodbye even when the heart wants to stay. These sacred interruptions, these soul-shifting losses, are not voids. They are thresholds. You step through them and realize that pain was a portal. You don't come out the same. You become more you, more aware, more aligned. You start noticing the layers of yourself that only surface because of that love, the depth you touched, the shadows you faced, the courage it took to love that deeply and then to lose. That's not failure. That's evolution. In fact, one of the most misunderstood acts of divine love is taking away what your ego clings to so that your spirit can rise. So, when a soul connection ends, don't ask, why did it go wrong? Instead ask, what did awaken? Because that's the gift, not the presence of the other person, but the version of yourself that was born through that experience. In the next and final part, we'll return full circle. We'll explore the profound invitation these connections offer, not to cling, not to despair, but to step into wholeness, to find the meaning in the mystery, and to share your own light as a result. And that's where transformation becomes purpose. At some point, you probably asked yourself, why couldn't we stay together? That burning question of why love didn't last. Why something so intense, so beautiful, had to fade away. But here's the deeper question you need to ask. What did they awaken in me? Sometimes, the relationships that we think we've lost are actually the ones that guide us toward finding ourselves. They are not the final chapter. They are the prologue to the most profound version of you. Maturity isn't about holding on. It's about understanding. It's about knowing when to let go with gratitude instead of resentment. It's about embracing the lessons in the pain and finding peace with the impermanence of everything. Not every person who walks into your life is meant to stay forever, but every person without exception has a purpose that extends far beyond the relationship itself, a purpose that leads to your awakening. It's easy to see separation as a loss, to blame the universe or the person for taking away something precious. But true growth begins when you let go of the blame and instead shift your perspective. Every experience is here to teach you something about yourself. So, the next time you feel that sting of what once was, ask yourself, what part of me is being awakened right now? What part of me is being called to grow? And rather than running from the pain, let it open a door for you to step through. Let it open a way to a deeper understanding of who you are. Because that pain, while real, isn't there to keep you stuck. It's there to help you transform. Remember this. You are not alone in the pain you carry. Every heartache, every heartbreak is a part of the human experience. We all go through it. So if you are carrying a hurt, a loss, know that you don't have to carry it in silence. Your story matters. Your healing matters. I invite you to share your experience. Leave a comment. Let's support each other in this journey. We're all on the path back to wholeness, and it's in sharing our stories that we realize the journey doesn't have to be walked alone. If you're reading this and you're still in the midst of your own transformation, remember that you are closer than you think to finding your peace. And the best part is that you are not just surviving this journey. You are becoming. You are evolving into someone stronger, wiser, and more connected to your true self. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. Let's keep this dialogue going and keep walking the path of awakening together.